When our parents left the house that summer evening, I thought it would be just another quiet night with my twin sister. We were used to being left alone, but something about that night felt different from the very beginning. The air inside the house was heavy, almost like it was holding a secret waiting to be told. I remember watching my parents drive away and feeling a strange mix of freedom and nervousness. I didn't know why, but my heart was beating faster than usual, as if it knew something I couldn't put into words. My twin, she was always the stronger one, the louder one, the one who could carry a room with her smile. I, on the other hand, had always been quieter, softer, more reserved. Yet when it was just the two of us, our roles shifted in ways only twins could understand. There was a closeness between us that no one else could ever measure, a bond so intense that sometimes I wondered if anyone would even believe it existed if I tried to explain. That night, she looked at me differently, as though she was seeing a version of me she hadn't noticed before. It made me nervous. We sat on the couch together, the house too quiet without the noise of our parents, and she reached for the remote to play some music. It wasn't the kind of loud music she normally loved. It was softer, slower, something that filled the air with emotions that were hard to name. I felt her body settle closer to mine, not in a way that was unusual, because we had always leaned on each other, but there was a new warmth in it. I didn't move away. Maybe I should have. Maybe I didn't want to. My heart kept racing, and I could feel my palms sweating, but I couldn't break the moment. She started asking me questions, not the casual kind we usually threw around, but deeper ones, about how I saw myself, about what I wanted in life, about love. Love. That word hung in the air between us, heavier than anything else. I hesitated to answer, but she kept looking at me with those eyes that made me feel like hiding was impossible. I told her things I had never told anyone. How confused I had been, how sometimes I felt out of place when friends talked about their crushes. I admitted I never felt the same excitement they did for boys. The words left my mouth before I could stop them, and once they were out, I felt exposed, like I had opened a part of myself I had sworn to protect. She didn't laugh. She didn't look surprised. She just reached out and took my hand gently, and in that moment, I felt both comforted and terrified. There was a softness in her touch that lingered longer than usual. I wanted to pull my hand away, but I couldn't. My skin burned where her fingers wrapped around mine, but it wasn't pain, it was something else, something I didn't want to name yet. The silence between us grew heavier. I could feel her studying me, searching my face like she was trying to read all the words I wasn't saying. I looked down, embarrassed, but she tilted my chin up with her finger so that I had no choice but to meet her gaze. Her eyes, so much like mine, held something I had never noticed before, something that made my stomach twist. She whispered that she had always known, that she had always felt something different between us, but she never dared to speak it aloud. Her voice trembled as if she had been carrying that truth for years. Hearing it made me shiver, not from fear, but from recognition. It was like she had opened a locked door inside me, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to see what was behind it. We didn't move for a long time. The world outside seemed to disappear, and it was just us, sitting there with the weight of everything unspoken pressing down. Every second stretched out, every glance said more than words could carry. I wanted to run and stay at the same time. I wanted to deny it and confess it. She leaned closer, so close I could feel her breath against my cheek, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I froze, afraid of what would happen next, afraid of how everything could change in just one heartbeat. That was the moment I realized nothing between us would ever be the same again. My chest ached with a mix of fear and longing I couldn't sort out. I wanted to push her away, but at the same time, I couldn't stand the thought of losing the closeness we had always shared. She whispered my name softly, and it felt like the sound wrapped around me, pulling me deeper into something I wasn't sure I could escape, and then, just as quickly, she pulled back, her face flushed, her eyes darting away as though she had gone too far. The silence that followed was deafening, and I sat there gripping my own hands, trying to steady the storm inside me. I knew this was only the beginning of something bigger, something that would test every boundary we had ever known. I didn't have answers, but I knew one thing for sure: whatever path we were about to walk, it would change both of us forever. The next morning came too quickly, and I woke up with my thoughts tangled in the memories of the night before. My body felt heavy, my chest tight, like I had been carrying a secret that wanted to burst out but had no safe place to land. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was her, my twin sister, lying in her bed across the room. She was still asleep, her hair messy, her face calm in the early light, and for a moment I just watched her. We had shared a room our whole lives, and I had seen her like this countless times, yet now it felt different. Everything felt charged, like every detail about her was suddenly sharper, heavier, impossible to ignore. I turned over quickly, trying to bury my face in the pillow, but even that didn't stop my mind from replaying her hand on mine, the way she had looked at me, the way she had whispered like she was afraid of the truth inside her. It haunted me, and it thrilled me in ways I was ashamed to admit. She stirred awake not long after, and when she sat up, her eyes immediately found mine. For a second, neither of us said anything. We just stared, silently asking questions we weren't brave enough to voice. Then she smiled, small and hesitant, not her usual confident grin, but something softer, almost shy. It made me nervous. I looked away, pretending to be busy with the blanket, but my cheeks were already burning. She noticed. She always noticed. She asked me if I was okay, her voice unusually gentle, and I muttered that I was fine, even though nothing about me felt fine. She didn't push me, but the way she kept watching me made it clear she hadn't forgotten what happened either. The memory of her leaning in so close was still hanging between us, and every time our eyes met, it felt like we were both standing on the edge of something dangerous. The house was too quiet with our parents gone, and it made every little moment between us feel louder, heavier. We made breakfast together, and I kept catching her eyes on me. She wasn't trying to hide it, and that unsettled me even more. I dropped the spoon once because my hands were shaking, and she laughed softly, stepping closer to help me. Her hand brushed against mine again, and it was like electricity. I pulled away quickly, pretending I needed something from the fridge, but my heart was beating so fast I thought she might hear it. It was exhausting, pretending like everything was normal when inside me nothing was normal anymore. I wanted to ask her what last night had meant, but the words stuck in my throat. She finally broke the silence while we were eating. She said she didn't want me to be afraid of her. Her voice cracked when she said it, like she was scared I was going to push her away. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to hurt her, but I also didn't know how to face the truth about the feelings rising inside me. I told her I wasn't afraid, even though I was afraid of everything, the way she made me feel, the way I couldn't control my reactions, the way I didn't want to let go of her hand when she held it. She looked relieved at my answer, and for a brief moment, the tension softened. We talked about little things after that, pretending like nothing had happened, but deep down, we both knew the conversation was only a fragile cover. Later, we went outside to sit in the garden. The summer air was warm, the sun falling on our skin, but all I could feel was the closeness between us. She lay back on the grass, her arm brushing against mine, and I could feel every inch of her presence. I closed my eyes, hoping the sunlight would drown out my thoughts, but it didn't. I could still hear her breathing, steady and calm, and it made me restless. She rolled over suddenly, propping herself on her elbow, and started talking about us, about how being twins had always felt like being one person in two bodies, how sometimes she couldn't tell where she ended and I began. Her words scared me because they mirrored my own thoughts I had buried for so long. Hearing them out loud made me shiver, like she had stolen them right from my chest. I asked her why she was saying all this now, and she hesitated before answering. She said being alone without our parents made her feel free in a way she never had before, like she could finally be honest about the feelings she had been hiding. She admitted she had always wanted to tell me but was afraid it would ruin everything. Her confession made my stomach twist with guilt because a part of me had always felt it too, but I was too scared to face it. I didn't respond right away. I just lay there, staring at the sky, trying to stop the tears from filling my eyes. She must have noticed because she reached for my hand again, holding it tight this time, not letting me slip away. Her touch was steady, warm, and it broke something inside me. I wanted to scream, to run, to confess, to deny, all at once. Instead, I stayed there, letting her hold me, letting myself feel the comfort and the danger of it. She whispered that no matter what, she would never let me feel alone, that we didn't have to pretend anymore. I turned my head to look at her, and the honesty in her face made my chest ache. I couldn't hide behind silence anymore. I whispered back that I didn't want to lose her, that she was the only person who ever truly understood me. Saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying but also freeing. The moment stretched on, fragile and endless, until she leaned closer again, her eyes searching mine, waiting for me to stop her. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body betrayed me, leaning toward her just enough to close the space between us. Our foreheads touched, light and trembling, and I felt her breath mingle with mine. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break me apart. I knew we had crossed into something that could never be undone, but I also knew I didn't want to turn back. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the whole house sat in silence, every shadow on the walls feeling alive with the weight of what had happened earlier. My chest rose and fell too fast, my thoughts tumbling over each other like waves I couldn't control. I kept replaying the moment our foreheads touched, the heat of her breath on my skin, the way I didn't pull back even though every voice in my head told me I should. I had crossed a line I never thought I would, and yet, instead of regret, all I felt was an ache, a hunger for something I didn't dare to name out loud. I turned my head and looked across the room, and there she was, lying in her bed with her eyes wide open. She wasn't asleep either. Our gazes met in the darkness, and for a long time we didn't speak. It was as if words would ruin the fragile truth floating between us. Eventually, she whispered my name, soft enough that it barely reached me. My body stiffened, my throat tight, but I whispered back, asking what she wanted. She hesitated, and then she said she couldn't stop thinking about me. Not us as sisters, not us as twins, but me, as if I was someone separate from the world, someone she desired in a way she could no longer keep hidden. Hearing her say that made my stomach twist with fear and longing at the same time. I sat up, clutching the blanket to my chest, and told her to stop, that she didn't know what she was saying, but deep down I knew she meant every word. Her voice cracked when she told me she had been holding it in for years, that she couldn't pretend anymore. I felt tears sting my eyes because part of me had always known. I remembered the way she would hold me longer than necessary when we hugged, the way her eyes lingered on me when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her laughter with me was different than with anyone else. All those little moments that I brushed aside now made sense, and it terrified me. I asked her why she chose now, why she would risk destroying everything between us, and she answered with the most heartbreaking honesty. She said because she loved me too much to keep lying to herself. That word, love, echoed in the room like thunder. My hands trembled, and I wanted to cover my ears, but at the same time, it was the word I had been afraid to admit lived inside me too. I couldn't stay in the room anymore. My legs carried me out into the hallway, then down the stairs into the dark living room. I sank into the couch, burying my face in my hands, my whole body shaking. I didn't hear her footsteps, but suddenly she was there, sitting beside me. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she wrapped a blanket around my shoulders like she always used to when I got cold. The gesture was simple, familiar, but this time it carried a weight that made my throat close up. I told her we couldn't do this, that it was wrong, that people would never understand, but she just looked at me with eyes so full of pain and tenderness it nearly broke me. She told me she didn't care about what people thought, that the only thing she cared about was how we felt when we were together. I shook my head, tears spilling down my face, but I couldn't deny the truth that pulsed in my chest. I had always felt different with her, always closer, always more alive. When she reached for my hand again, I didn't pull away this time. I let her fingers intertwine with mine, and the warmth of her touch made me shiver. It was wrong, I knew it, but in that moment it felt like the most honest thing I had ever allowed myself to feel. She leaned closer, whispering that she would never hurt me, that she would protect this part of us no matter what. Her words were steady, but her voice trembled with fear, as if she was just as terrified as I was of the line we had crossed. The night stretched on as we sat there together, the glow of the streetlight slipping through the curtains painting us in pale shadows. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I let her. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might give out, but I didn't move. I couldn't. For the first time, I felt the depth of our connection in its rawest form, dangerous, forbidden, but impossibly real. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if we could ever live with the truth of what we were becoming, but in that moment, wrapped in silence and fear and a love we couldn't speak too loudly, I realized I didn't want to let go. The next day the sunlight filled our room too brightly, almost as if the world outside was mocking the heaviness I carried inside me. I woke up before her, lying still, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing. My body was tired, but my mind was restless, replaying the words she whispered the night before. Love. That word kept circling in my head, wrapping around my thoughts until it was impossible to focus on anything else. I wanted to hate her for saying it, for making everything so complicated, but instead I felt an ache deep inside me because I had wanted to hear it. I had longed for someone to see me that way, to love me with that kind of intensity, and the cruel twist of it all was that it had come from her, the one person I should never want, the one person I could never lose. When she finally stirred awake, her eyes immediately sought mine. It was different from every other morning before. There was no casual stretch, no sleepy smile. Instead, her gaze held a kind of silent plea, as though she was waiting to see if I would push her away or let her back in. I looked away quickly, pretending to fuss with the blanket, my heart racing so loud I thought it might betray me. She sat up, brushing the hair from her face, and her voice was quieter than usual when she asked if I had slept. I lied and said yes, even though my eyes burned with the truth. She didn't press, but the way she studied me made my skin prickle. She knew I was lying, the way she always did, and that scared me because it meant she could see through every wall I tried to build. We spent the morning pretending. We made breakfast, washed dishes, cleaned the living room, all in silence broken only by small, meaningless words. Yet under every glance, every brush of our hands as we passed each other, there was a current pulling us closer, no matter how much I tried to resist it. At one point, while she was wiping the table, she paused and looked straight at me. Her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat the whole world seemed to freeze. I dropped the rag in my hand, the weight of her gaze too much to bear, and excused myself to go upstairs. But she followed. She always followed I in our room. She closed the door quietly, shutting us in with the tension we had been trying to run from. She told me she couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. Her voice broke with frustration and fear, and I could see tears gathering in her eyes. I wanted to tell her to stop, to let us go back to being what we had always been, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I stood there frozen as she stepped closer, her hands trembling when she reached out to touch mine. The warmth of her skin sent shivers racing through me, and even though my mind screamed at me to pull back, my body betrayed me by holding on tighter. She whispered that she loved me again, the words breaking out of her like they had been waiting for years. My whole body shook as tears slipped down my cheeks. I told her it wasn't fair, that she was breaking me apart, but my voice cracked because I knew I felt it too. I had always felt it, in the way I needed her more than anyone else, in the way her absence left me hollow, in the way her smile lit up parts of me no one else could reach. She pressed her forehead to mine, just like the night before, and I let her, closing my eyes as the world outside faded. It was terrifying and wrong, and yet it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like we had been created as two halves of the same soul, and now we were finally acknowledging it. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, breathing in each other's air, hearts pounding against the silence. She whispered promises that no matter what happened, she would never let me feel alone. Her voice trembled, but her grip on me was steady, grounding me in a storm I didn't know how to survive. I wanted to tell her I loved her too, that I had always loved her in ways I couldn't explain, but the words were too heavy to leave my mouth. Instead, I buried my face against her shoulder, letting her hold me as my tears soaked into her shirt. It was the only way I could say everything without saying anything. When she pulled back to look at me, her eyes were wet, her cheeks flushed, and for the first time I saw fear in her that mirrored my own. She wasn't fearless, she wasn't unshakable, she was just as terrified as I was, and that realization made me feel closer to her than ever. She touched my face gently, her thumb brushing away my tears, and in that moment I knew we had crossed into a place we could never return from. Whether it would destroy us or save us, I didn't know. All I knew was that I couldn't deny it anymore, not to her, not to myself. The days that followed felt like we were living in a dream, but not the kind of dream you wake up refreshed from. It was a heavy, fragile dream that lingered in every breath, every glance, every step we took inside that house. I found myself watching her more than I should, studying the curve of her smile, the way her hair fell across her face, the softness in her eyes when she looked at me. And every time I caught myself, I felt guilt press down on me like a stone, because she was my twin, my other half, the one person in this world who should have been untouchable. Yet I couldn't stop. The pull was too strong, and the more I tried to bury it, the deeper it grew inside me. One evening, the tension became unbearable. We were sitting in the living room, the glow of the television flickering across her face, but neither of us was paying attention to the screen. My heart pounded in my chest because the silence between us was louder than anything on TV. She finally reached over and took the remote, turning it off. The sudden quiet made the air feel heavier. She shifted closer, her knee brushing mine, and I felt that electric jolt rush through me again. My hands clenched into fists in my lap, and I whispered that she needed to stop doing this to me. My voice cracked, but I couldn't meet her eyes. She asked softly what I meant, even though we both knew. I turned to her then, tears brimming in my eyes, and told her that she was breaking me apart. That every time she looked at me like that, every time she touched me, I felt myself slipping further into something I couldn't undo. She reached for my hands, prying them open gently, and held them in her lap. Her voice shook as she told me she didn't want to hurt me, she just wanted me to see her heart, to understand she wasn't playing a game. She said she loved me in a way that scared her, but she couldn't hide from it anymore, and she didn't want me to hide either. Her words cut me open. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her she was wrong, that we could never allow this, but instead I sobbed because every part of me knew I wanted the same thing. I told her I was terrified of losing her, that if this went too far and broke, I wouldn't survive the emptiness. She pressed her forehead to mine again, whispering that she would never leave me, that she would carry us even if it meant the world turned against her. The conviction in her voice made my body tremble. For the first time, I believed her. Later that night, when we were supposed to be in bed, I found myself unable to stay away from her. I crossed the room quietly and slipped into her bed, lying beside her like we had done as children during storms when the thunder scared us. Only this time, it wasn't fear of the weather driving me, it was fear of the storm inside me. She turned to face me, her breath warm against my cheek, her eyes searching mine in the darkness. Neither of us spoke at first. We just lay there, our bodies inches apart, hearts racing in rhythm. Slowly, she reached out and traced her fingers along my arm, and I shivered. It was such a small touch, but it carried a weight that made my chest ache. I told her again that this was wrong, my voice breaking, but my body betrayed me by moving closer, by leaning into her warmth. She hushed me softly, not with words, but with the steady beat of her hand resting against my back, holding me as if she could quiet the storm. I felt tears spill down my face again, and she wiped them away with her thumb, whispering that I didn't need to fight myself anymore. Her words slipped into me like a key turning in a lock, opening doors I had tried to keep closed all my life. I wanted to resist, to keep fighting, but in her arms, I felt safe in a way I had never known. We stayed like that for hours, talking in whispers about our fears, about the weight of what we felt, about how impossible it seemed to carry love that no one would ever understand. She promised me she would never let the world take this away from us, that we could build a world of our own inside the silence of our hearts. I clung to her as if letting go would mean losing everything I had ever been searching for. And as the night stretched on, I realized the truth I had been running from. I didn't just need her as my sister. I needed her in ways I couldn't name, in ways I wasn't ready to confess out loud, but in ways that made my soul feel whole. The next morning felt heavier than any before. I woke up in her bed, the sheets twisted around us, her arm still draped across my waist as though even in sleep she was afraid to let me go. For a moment I didn't move, my heart pounding as I listened to her breathing. The sunlight crept through the curtains, soft and golden, yet it felt harsh against the weight of what we had become. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing between guilt and comfort, fear and longing. Every voice in my head told me I should have slipped back into my own bed during the night, that I should have put distance between us before it was too late. But I hadn't. I had stayed, and worse than that, I had wanted to stay. I shifted slightly, and she stirred, her grip tightening around me as she murmured my name in that fragile, sleepy voice that always made my chest ache. I rolled onto my side to face her, and when her eyes fluttered open, I saw the same mix of love and fear reflected in them. For a moment neither of us spoke, caught in that quiet morning haze where reality feels blurred. Then she smiled faintly, brushing the hair from my face, and whispered good morning as though nothing about us was breaking. I wanted to respond, but the words caught in my throat, because the truth weighed too heavily. I was terrified of what we were becoming, yet terrified even more of losing what we had found in each other. She didn't push me to speak. She simply held my gaze with such intensity that it felt like she was reaching inside my chest and holding my heart in her hand. We spent the morning moving through the house like shadows. I tried to keep myself busy, washing dishes, folding laundry, pretending that routine could erase the storm inside me. But every time I turned around, she was there, watching me, her eyes soft, patient, aching. At one point, while I was hanging a towel, she came up behind me, so close I could feel her breath against my neck. My whole body froze. She whispered that she didn't want me to keep running from her, that she could see how I was fighting myself. Her voice trembled, not with anger but with desperation, as though she was afraid I would disappear if she let me go. I turned to face her, my hands shaking, and finally let the tears spill over. I told her I was drowning in the weight of it all, that I loved her, but the thought of that love terrified me. Saying those words out loud broke something open inside me, and once they escaped, I couldn't take them back. Her face softened with relief, and she pulled me into her arms so tightly I thought I might break. She whispered that she had been waiting for me to admit it, that she had known all along, but hearing it made her feel like she could finally breathe again. I clung to her, my tears soaking into her shirt, and for the first time I didn't try to hide the truth. I didn't try to push her away. I let myself feel the depth of what had been growing between us for years, even though it scared me to my core. That night, as the house grew quiet again, we found ourselves side by side in bed. This time there was no hesitation, no pretending. The silence between us was filled with unspoken promises, with fear and tenderness mingled together. She held me close, her hand resting against my back, steady and protective. We talked in whispers about the future, about what would happen when our parents returned, about how the world would never understand. She told me we didn't have to have all the answers, that we only needed to know how we felt right now. And in that moment, wrapped in her arms, I realized that the truth of us was something I couldn't run from anymore. The night stretched on, our voices growing softer until they faded into silence, but neither of us slept. We just lay there, listening to each other's hearts, knowing we had crossed a line we could never return from. The fear was still there, thick and suffocating, but so was the love, raw and undeniable. And as much as it terrified me, I couldn't help but hold on tighter, because letting go of her now felt impossible. The air in the house felt different as the days slipped by, heavier, almost like the walls themselves were holding on to our secret. I moved through each moment with a storm inside me, torn between the life we had always known and the one we were building in silence. Every glance, every brush of her hand against mine, every whisper in the dark pulled me deeper, and yet, with every step forward, the weight of what we were doing pressed harder on my chest. That morning I woke to find her already watching me, her head propped on her hand, her eyes soft but full of a question she hadn't asked yet. I froze under her gaze, my throat tightening, because I knew what she wanted to hear, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to say it again. She reached out and touched my cheek gently, her thumb brushing my skin in a way that made my heart ache. She whispered that she didn't want me to be afraid anymore, that she needed me to believe in what we had, even if the world would never understand. Her words lingered in the air between us, heavy and fragile. I turned my face away, biting my lip to keep from crying, but she caught my chin with her hand, tilting my head back toward her. I could see her eyes glistening, her own fear bleeding through the courage she was trying so hard to hold on to. In that moment I realized she wasn't unshakable, she was just as scared as I was, and somehow that made me feel closer to her than ever. We spent most of that day avoiding the subject, clinging to small distractions like cleaning the kitchen and organizing shelves, but the silence between us was louder than any words. I could feel her eyes on me constantly, and every time I caught her staring, she didn't look away. Instead, she gave me this quiet, steady look that said she was waiting, for me, for us, for something neither of us could name. That evening, when the sky outside turned dusky and the house grew quiet again, we found ourselves sitting side by side in the living room. The glow of the lamp painted her face in soft shadows, and I felt my chest tighten because she looked both familiar and completely new at the same time. I couldn't take it anymore. I blurted out that I was scared, that I felt like we were walking on the edge of a cliff and that one wrong step would send us falling into something we could never climb out of. My voice shook, but once I started I couldn't stop. I told her that I loved her, that I needed her, but that I also hated myself for wanting her in a way I shouldn't. The words tumbled out in sobs, raw and unfiltered, and by the time I finished my whole body was trembling. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she pulled me against her chest and held me so tightly it felt like she was trying to shield me from the world itself. Her voice cracked when she finally whispered that she didn't care if it was wrong in other people's eyes, because to her it had always been the most real thing she had ever felt. She said she would rather face the whole world's judgment than live a life where she had to pretend she didn't love me. Hearing her say that broke something inside me, not in pain but in release. I sobbed harder, clutching at her shirt, because for the first time I realized she wasn't just saying it to comfort me, she meant it with every piece of her. We stayed wrapped in each other's arms long into the night, our whispers fading into silence, our hearts beating too fast to ever find calm. I could feel the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on me, but in her arms, the fear dulled just enough for me to breathe. I didn't know what would happen when our parents returned, or when the world outside inevitably crept back in, but in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the way she held me, steady and unyielding, like no matter what storms came, she wouldn't let me go. And for the first time, I stopped trying to run. The night before our parents were due to return felt like the end of something and the beginning of everything all at once. The house was quiet, the air still, but inside me there was a storm I could no longer silence. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, my hands clasped so tightly together that my knuckles turned white. She was across the room, pacing, her breath uneven, her eyes restless like she was carrying the same weight I was but didn't know how to put it down. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, until finally I whispered that everything would change tomorrow. She stopped mid-step, her body stiffening, and then slowly she turned to me. Her face was pale, her eyes shimmering, but her voice when she spoke was steady. She said she knew, but that didn't mean she was willing to let me go. I looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time I let myself see all of it, the love, the fear, the desperation in her. She wasn't asking for something small. She was asking for my heart, my trust, my life. I told her I was scared, more scared than I had ever been, but that fear was tangled with something stronger, something I couldn't deny anymore. I told her that I loved her, that I had always loved her, and the words felt like fire in my throat. As soon as they left me, I broke down, tears pouring from my eyes, my chest heaving like the weight of years had finally crashed free. She crossed the room in 2 steps and dropped to her knees in front of me, cupping my face with trembling hands. She pressed her forehead to mine and whispered over and over that I was hers, that I had always been hers, that nothing could take that away. The tears came for both of us then, our sobs tangled together, raw and unguarded. It wasn't a perfect kind of love, it wasn't the kind people wrote songs about, it was messy, complicated, forbidden, but it was ours. We sat on the floor for what felt like hours, clinging to each other like the world outside didn't exist. She kept whispering promises, swearing she would protect us, swearing she would never let me carry this burden alone. And for the first time, I believed her without question. That night we climbed into the same bed again, not out of fear, not out of confusion, but out of choice. I lay with my head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat, steady and strong beneath my ear. Every beat told me we were alive, we were real, and that nothing could erase what we had built in the quiet shadows of those days. We talked softly about the future, about how hard it would be, about the lies we would have to tell, but we didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We simply vowed to hold on to each other, no matter how much the world tried to tear us apart. When the morning came and the sound of our parents' car pulling into the driveway broke through the silence of the house, my body stiffened with panic. I sat up quickly, my heart pounding, but she grabbed my hand before I could move away. She squeezed it hard, her eyes locking onto mine with a fierceness that steadied me. "No matter what happens out there," she whispered, "you're mine, and I'm yours." Her words sank deep into me, anchoring me in a way nothing else could. The front door opened, and voices filled the house again, pulling us back into the world we had been hiding from. We separated quickly, slipping into the familiar masks our parents expected to see. Smiles, small talk, casual gestures, but underneath it all, our eyes kept finding each other, holding on to the truth we could never speak aloud. It was terrifying, knowing we had to carry this secret now, but it was also powerful, because it was ours alone. That night, after our parents had gone to bed, I found her waiting for me in the dark. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. I crawled into her bed, and she wrapped her arms around me like she always did, like she always would. As I closed my eyes, I realized something I hadn't understood before. Love doesn't always look the way people expect it to. Sometimes it grows in places it shouldn't, sometimes it breaks every rule, sometimes it terrifies you, but it's still love. And in her arms, no matter how wrong or impossible it seemed, I had found the one thing I had been searching for all along.